Today I'm looking at the Llano dual battery fast charger for Nikon batteries. I'm always looking for a more efficient way to keep my batteries charged when on the road. For some of my trips, I'm away from electricity for multiple days, and even with extra batteries for my cameras, I still want a way to keep the batteries charged while on the road. To do this, I usually make sure I have a USB charger, something like this, that I can use with my power banks to keep my batteries topped off. So when Llano offered to send me their dual battery fast charger for Nikon EN-EL15 style batteries, I was eager to try it out. I received the charger from Llano a few weeks before my Great Smoky Mountains National Park trip, and I used it at home quite a bit before the trip, and a good amount of time while I was on that trip. It was the only battery charger I took. Before I start talking about my experience with the charger, let's take a look at what you get with this. First, you get a battery charger with the lid, and it has a nice little lid like this. Now keep in mind, you do have to have this plugged into a power source to be charged. It takes external power to charge, it's not self-charging. It does come with two Llano EN-EL15C batteries at 2400 milliamps a piece. Comes with a handy cloth pouch, and it comes with a USB-C cable as well. As far as its advertised specs, it is fast charging with PD 3.0 and QC 3.0 technology, and of course it can charge two batteries at once. Has an LED battery level indicator on the front of the case. It tells you how much power each battery has left, and there's a charging indicator when you have it plugged in right up here that tells you it's charging. It does double as a storage box, allowing you to keep two batteries in here, though we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little later. And it also has a storage slot for a spare SD card. So you have two batteries and an SD card here as a spare. Charging case has integrated safety features that include multiple safeguards such as thermal management, short circuit prevention, just to help ensure the safety and longevity of your batteries. It will charge both the Llano batteries and OEM batteries in the case, so it's compatible with both. Case also has a USB-C connection for charging. This allows for flexible charging. It lets me use the power banks, it lets me charge in a car if I have a USB port, or it lets me use a wall plug. Again, you can only charge your batteries if you have an external power source for it. So with that, let's get into my experience with this charger. I've had this charger for about a month and a half now. When I first got it, I played with it at home, charging different batteries, making sure it worked with my OEM Nikon batteries, making sure the Llano batteries worked, just to be sure it all worked out. As expected, there were no issues with it. The charger worked fine, the third-party Llano batteries worked fine, and I was easily able to charge from a power bank, such as this, and from a wall plug. So, knowing it was going to work with my intended usage, it was the only battery charger I took with me recently to the Smokies, and I used it to charge my Nikon stills camera batteries, the Z6 II and Z7 II, and I used both the Llano batteries and my normal OEM batteries on that trip, because during that trip I wasn't going to have electricity for 5 days, and I was relying completely on my power banks for charging the camera batteries. And everything worked great on that trip. The charger worked, it charged the batteries pretty quickly, and I used it several times on the trip. Again, I used it both with the Nikon batteries and the Llano batteries, and I was using these power banks to charge it, and I had no problems with it. Kept all my batteries charged for that trip. I found it particularly handy to have the lid on the charging case, as it made me feel much more confident that when I just sort of tossed this on my seat with my power bank and all plugged in, that it would keep charging even if things got jostled around a bit as I was driving around through the park. So while this case is just a little bit bigger than what I've been using in the past, the added convenience of the lid was nice because it did, like I said, it gave me that confidence that it would keep charging even if things got jostled and the battery wouldn't fall out of the charger. So I had no issues with the charging case leading up to the trip or while on that trip, or even when back at home and I've been using the batteries and stuff even post-trip. So it's been working out great. The charger does come with two Llano EN-EL15C batteries. They fit in the Nikon. It's worked fine in my Nikon Z6 II and my Nikon Z7 II. They're 2400 milliamp in capacity, so they're pretty good sized batteries, and like I said, they worked fine. I had no compatibility problems with the camera. Now, I've only used them in warmer weather. It hasn't been cold out yet or anything like that, but so far the battery life seems reasonable and what I would expect. A real test would be trying to see how these work in the cold, because if I see a problem with non-OEM batteries, it's generally in the cold, but I haven't had the chance to try that out yet. Now, just real quick, before we move on to the charger and some of my thoughts about it, I do want to talk about third-party batteries for your camera. While I typically try to only use OEM batteries, I fully admit I have third-party batteries as well for those cases where I desperately need some extra power. For me, they make a good backup for when my OEM ones run out or while I'm trying to charge my OEM ones. So, while I tend towards OEM batteries, I do make use of third parties here and there. And my biggest caution to people considering using third-party batteries or using them now is simply just don't store them in the camera. One of the risks, if you're really worried about things, is storing the battery in your camera. if you store it in there for a long period of time, if a third-party battery fails, it tends to fail in that they swell up. Then when they swell up, they get stuck inside the camera. So I will use them in my camera, but I try to make a habit not to store them in my camera. It's fine when you're out for a day, but once I get home, like I said, try to make sure I don't keep them in the camera. So that's just my advice when it comes to using third-party batteries. They can be handy, an inexpensive way to get that additional power needs for if you just happen to run out of your main batteries. But like I said, I try not to store them in the camera. Okay, let's get back to the charging case itself and some of my thoughts after using it on my Great Smoky Mountains National Park trip. First, it worked great on that trip. It did everything I would have expected. It let me charge my batteries, let me use a power bank, no problems, and it'll likely be my go-to charging case for future trips. It's a little on the bulky side compared to my normal one, but with the lid, it gives me that extra sense of security that the battery is going to stay charging even if things are getting jostled around in the Forerunner. So I can sort of live with that. And it's not too heavy when the batteries are out of it. It's really not too heavy. And like I said, it'll likely be my charging case that I use on future trips as well. Now I did really like that it uses a USB-C port to get the power to it from either a power bank or a wall charger or anything like that. In the past, the ones I've used were micro USB, and I've been trying somewhat unsuccessfully to convert everything I have that needs a charge over to USB-C. That way it can help minimize the chances of me forgetting to take the right cable for something. So I was super glad to see the USB-C port on this. The battery charge level on the case is pretty cool. You can just press this button right here and it tells you what it is. As you can see here, I've got a 100 here on this one battery and 58 here. So the battery charge level on the charging case is pretty cool. It's better than having to check batteries in the camera. I can just pop the battery in this case, press the button and see what percentage is left. In this case, I've got 100 on the one battery, 58 on the other. And it's also handy for when you're actually charging a battery because you can sort of see how much further you have to go before the battery is full. So I sort of like that fast, easy way to check the charge of batteries without having to pop them in and out of the camera. I also like they can charge 2 batteries at once. I always prefer cases that can do that. Again, when I take multiple still cameras with me on trips, so being able to charge multiple batteries overnight is super helpful. I also like that it can charge 2 batteries at once. I tend to travel with 2 stills cameras, so being able to charge 2 batteries overnight or during the day is super helpful. It just helps make sure I can keep my batteries topped up. Again, I've been charging OEM batteries with this, and I've been charging the Llano batteries with this, and I've had no problems. But yeah, being able to charge 2 batteries at once, super helpful. So like I said, from my experience out in the field with this was a super handy charger. Those features really just sort of enhanced it, added to it. And like I said, it's probably gonna be my go-to battery charger on future trips. So there's always room for improvement and feedback on most products that are out there. And so I do have a couple thoughts on just a couple things I think could make this product just a little better. But first, let's start with its price. It's listed for right around $95 on Amazon right now. And I think that price is just a little too high. While it does have more features, including the lid, USB-C, that are nice to haves, it is more expensive than what I used to use for travel in the past. And I'm just not sure it's worth quite twice as much what I've used in the past. However, with that said, Llano is supposed to be working on allowing the case itself to charge batteries, so you wouldn't have to plug it in. I think if they can add that feature into this and not adjust that price too much, suddenly this lands in a price range that's pretty cool. Even at like $95, if this would charge the batteries without being connected, that would make it super awesome because you can just toss batteries in this in your pack, use it for storage while the batteries are getting charged. Now I mentioned earlier that you can store the batteries in the case like this, and that is pretty handy because it just helps make everything more efficient and consolidate things down. But I noticed if you leave them in the case for an extended period of time, there does seem to be some power draw on the battery. I don't really notice it over a day or two, so like when I was on my trip, I could keep a battery in here and I really didn't notice it. But if I left it in here for like 2 weeks or something like that, and then pulled the battery out, there's some sort of draw. I'm guessing it's because you can just press this button to get the LED, and that's leading to some of that draw. So while I think it's fine to store your battery in here for a trip while you're out on the road, it shouldn't be any problem. I wouldn't store them long term if you're expecting to just grab your battery, have it at 100%, and go from there. So keep an eye on that and just be careful of leaving the battery here in the charger for an extended period of time because it's probably going to draw the battery down a little bit. And we're talking weeks here. We're not talking like overnight or something like that. We're talking weeks. So just be careful of that. And finally, the last thing I noticed is that the charge percentage on the case doesn't necessarily match what the camera says. So if here it might say 58%, but if I put this battery in my camera, it'll say something around 71, 72%. It's not a big deal. It's more, for me, the percentage is more informative than a flashing LED light on most chargers. So it's helpful to have the percentage, but if you think this says 58% and that's what the camera's gonna think, that's not necessarily the case. In most cases, I found the camera thought the battery was more fully charged than this. So if I was going to err in one direction or the other, I think that's what I'd want because I'd rather this underestimate the charge so that when I put it in here, I'm better off than I thought. But just be aware that the percentages between the case and what the camera reports aren't identical. So there are several cool features of this Llano charger, and I do plan on continuing to use it on my trips. I think if they add the ability for the case to charge without being plugged in, so to make it a built-in power bank, I think this thing becomes even cooler and an even more useful product. So I know I'll be looking forward to that release, because I think that'll really take this thing next level, if it would act as a power bank for the batteries in here as well. But pretty cool little product. So hopefully you found this look at the Llano charger helpful. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, and mini gear reviews, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.